Thank you, everybody. First off, I apologize for conducting this on a Friday at 3 o'clock in front of a long weekend. And before I get started on a bit of a timeline here and questions, I thought it was really important to at this point say as well. I want to thank Kyle Dubas for the 9 years that he has given to this hockey organization and all the tremendous contributions that he has made to the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's been a fantastic employee and a fantastic person the entire time. Timeline on the Kyle Dubas contract. I suppose you could go back to last offseason. I approached Kyle in his office at the Ford Performance Center and explained to him that he would be not receiving a contract offer prior to his final year of his contract. I tried to reassure him that it wasn't a reflection on his future with the club. I reminded him that it was a situation I found myself in a few years prior as well, and that it was my hope and it was my intention that at the end of the year and after being judged for the full 5 years of his contract, that we would be extending him and moving forward. Kyle took it very well. I thought he was a pro. He addressed that in his opening season statements, that he was comfortable with that, and I thought that he had done an excellent job. I thought Kyle had a great offseason. We had some difficult choices to make. If you're judging him on the work he did last summer, some of the decisions of letting players go, of signing some players, I think it's a challenging job for any general manager, and I think Kyle did an excellent job. We came into the season very well organized, many options. I thought the team, typical season of highs and lows, but had an excellent regular season. Going throughout the year, the way that the team was managed, I had no issue with that. As a matter of fact, I thought that, again, Kyle did an excellent job. The trade deadline, again, going back to his process and the way that our team does this here under his leadership, there's a lot of input, and I thought that he made some very good moves. And I thought he had prepared the team to the best of his ability, as any GM can do after the trade deadline. There's not as much for a GM to do. So it was important for me shortly after the trade deadline, around the middle of March, I approached Kyle in his office at Ford Performance Center and told him that I had seen enough in my mind that I had wanted him to be our general manager going forward, but that he should go home and take some time to think about it. And if he was comfortable with that idea, I would start talking to ownership about that. Kyle appreciated that. We had a good relationship the whole year. That day was nothing different. He came back to me about a week later and said yes, that he was comfortable moving forward, and he gave me the name of his agent, or he said his agent would reach out to me, but that he didn't want this to be a distraction for him, and I respected his wishes that I wasn't going to discuss it with him any further at that point. So fast forward to the end of the season, getting through the end of the regular season, the playoffs. I had many good conversations with Kyle's agent, felt we were making progress. I wanted to be in a position to respect Kyle's wishes and not discuss this with him as it was going along. But I knew his agent from time to time was giving him updates. That's really up to them. I don't know exactly what was going on there. But I felt those conversations, which were productive, had put me in a position that when the season ended, or even if it was between rounds, because at a certain point I felt however round 2 ended, even if we were moving on to round 3, that this was something that needed attention now. And I felt that those conversations and the communications I got from Kyle had put me in a position where I could come to him with something that was pretty much a finished deal, that reflected what he wanted financially and what he wanted as a general manager, what was important to him. When the season did end, unfortunately, abruptly, it was very important to me that I was ready to go early. I expressed to Kyle that night that, as disappointed as we all were, I thought he had done a good job. it's a tough time for the players. It's a tough time for management. It's a tough time for all of us. It's a tough time for Maple Leaf fans in those moments after a loss. But we had a day off on Saturday. We communicated a little bit through text. On Sunday, we had a team photo here. We went up to my office. I had another good conversation with Kyle. I presented him with what I thought was a framework that reflected what his agent and I had talked to, and a good finishing place in the effort to get this done as soon as possible. And Kyle took it. He seemed fine, or he seemed pleased to receive that news so quickly. We then talked about the hockey team for another couple of hours, and we went home. And we knew the next day we were having exit physicals and media. We talked a little bit about doing media. I had expressed to him that it was not my intention to talk to the media until I had something settled with him. I expressed that I thought it was maybe a good idea if he didn't either, but Kyle said he really wanted to talk to the media, and I respected that. He felt that his players were speaking, his coach was speaking, and that he should as well, and I respected his wishes. So the next day when, and let me go back, I would also say part of our conversation in my office was that this was hard on his family, in fairness. We talked about that, how, quite frankly, it's hard on all our families. It's a difficult thing. It's hard on the players, the parents, but it's the job we choose. It's the sport we choose. We're very fortunate to be in it, but it does not come without a toll on the families. And I completely acknowledge that. And we talked a little bit about that. The next day, though, I would say while watching Kyle's press, I think at that point there was a shift in my thinking at that moment, a dramatical shift in my thinking as I drove home that night, that, as Kyle expressed, he might not want to be our GM, and I have to take that very seriously. As I had said to him the day before, I understood those feelings and the pressure that players are under, the pressure that management, coaches, family members are under. But it was a very real possibility for me at that point that I would be needing to look somewhere else. And it's, as part of my job, that is what I began to do, while still hoping that Kyle and I could come to some sort of a resolution. What I would say then was, in the next few days, I didn't get any more clarity. Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Kyle and I did not meet privately. On Wednesday, we did meet privately, and we discussed this again for a long time. I had probably more questions than answers, and I did not have clarity. It further made me feel that there's a strong possibility that rightfully anyone's right to do so, he might not want to be the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So my focus then again continued toward the path of, what do we look like next year with a different general manager? To Thursday, the next day, Kyle had said that his agent was going to call me and that he would reach out to me as well. I got a call in the afternoon from his agent, and basically a new financial package was presented to me by the agent. The conversation was brief. I did not hear from Kyle throughout the day, and I went home, and just before dinner time, I got an email from Kyle saying that he did want to be the general manager of the Maple Leafs. At that point, I have to, if I'm being honest, I had gotten to a different place about how I felt about the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs and what was best. And as hard as it was, and as hard as it is to make a significant change to somebody that you're close to and that you've been working with for 9 years, even though I was presented with, well, a gap had risen within the contract status, and but nevertheless, the email that I received from Kyle, I just felt differently, and I felt that the long-term future of the Maple Leafs might have to change, and slept on that, and woke up this morning, drove to Kyle's office at Ford Performance Center, and informed him that we were not going to be renewing his contract. And that's where we are here today. Obviously, there will be questions, and I'm happy to do my best and answer the ones that I can. My focus now, after I'm done with this, is immediately to begin the pursuit of interviewing candidates for being the next general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Just raise your hand. Chris Johnson right there.
So, Brendan, just to follow what you've said there, do you think from your side of things that this broke down entirely over money?
No, I wouldn't characterize it as breaking down over money. I think, like I said, I think knowing and recognizing Monday after the availability that when a general manager is playing out the last year of his contract, there's always the possibility of a contingency that you might need a new general manager. He might choose to go to another team. And I think that I felt I had gotten a little bit closer and felt some indications that we were going to work this out. I would say after the press conference on Monday, I was less sure. And I thought there is a real possibility that he might not want to do this, and that he might need to, I think, as he said, take a step back. At that point, I hadn't ruled Kyle Dubas out, but I certainly had to make sure that I was thinking of other options as well.
Kevin.
Brendan, you said at one point you realized the future of the Maple Leafs have to change in reference to moving on from Kyle. Does that mean you look for a different kind of general manager, like a person with a different kind of vision for the team? Or what are you looking for in your next guy?
Well, what I would say is that I'm going to be open-minded to who that person can be. I want to be open-minded to all candidates. Certainly having an experienced general manager would be an attractive quality.
Luke.
How much of this decision was yours alone versus getting input from the board and ownership on letting Kyle go?
Well, I think in any organization, and ours is no different, on decisions as big as this, it is something that you communicate with your bosses. But this was ultimately my decision. They were supportive, but ultimately that is my job, and it is my job to make recommendations to them, and that was my recommendation and decision.
Josh.
Kyle had, you said you could have maybe signed him last summer. What's the level of regret now that didn't get done, and having a lame duck general manager, for lack of a better term, for the whole year, and what that strain might have also meant?
I think it's more common than people realize. I think that players go through it, management goes through it, coaches go through it, and it's not ideal, certainly. But I thought that's why it was very important to be very communicative with Kyle throughout the year, try to be as supportive as I could throughout the year, and also go to him as soon as I thought that it was fair to go to him that after the trade deadline and say that if you're comfortable doing this and take your time to find out if you are, I want to start going to work on getting this done. So that was not something that would be on his mind going into the playoffs, that I felt he had put the team in a position to have success. So it was important to me to not just wait and see what the result was, but to be consistent, not with just the support I try to give him on a daily basis, but also have something tangible presented to him in the form of a verbal commitment by me, and then subsequent conversations with his agent that went well.
Terry.
So Brendan, just to be clear, on Monday then, when Kyle said to us they left the door open to not returning next season as Leafs GM, that was news to you, more or less, that could be a possibility?
I think we had discussed that certainly it was a concern, not just for Kyle, but but we're speaking about Kyle specifically. I think we discussed the day before that it was a concern for him. I didn't expect that he was going to go out and put that to the public, but nevertheless, it made it all more real and all more serious, certainly. It presented certainly lots of questions. I have no issue with Kyle's honesty, Kyle's emotions. I think Kyle is an honest person. Like I said, I've been in this game a long time. We have all had these experiences where we see, whether it's as a player or in management, how this can impact your children at school or your family. So I want to be very empathetic and understanding and know and understand that's a very real thing, not just in Toronto and not just in the sport of hockey, but really everywhere. I do think it's a massive privilege to be able to play or work in the National Hockey League. But that's not to underscore that it is difficult for all athletes in all cities and management as well.
David.
Right, and as you look for a new general manager, are there any other personnel decisions that you're going to make between now and then, or are you going to let the new person handle that?
Sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
Are there any personnel decisions you're going to make between now and when you hire the new general manager, or are you going to leave that to the new person in terms of head coach? Other staff that might happen?
I think that I have spoken with most of our staff. I've called several of our players. And I have another call set up with more staff members after I'm done here. I think that some of those decisions have to be the responsibility of the new general manager. And I think in the meantime, I'm going to lean heavily on Brandon Pridham, and we're going to get through this time. But timeline-wise, and I've had a great conversation with Wes Clark about the upcoming draft, and we've built something here that I think that there are a lot of people who are shocked and saddened today, and that it'd be a little strange if it wasn't that way. But we also have a lot of people here that are coming back to work and doing their jobs and getting ready to do the things that they are paid to do, and that was encouraging. And as far as any sort of big major decisions, the biggest one is finding a general manager. And to me, there's an urgency to do that. I don't think it needs to be rushed. I want to really say, I'm not going to do it in a hastily way. I want to be very thoughtful and thorough, but I do think it is a priority and it needs to happen rather soon.
We're only going to do three more. Lance, Mark, and Zeiss.
Brendan, many of us were in the same room, I think, 9 years ago when you hired Kyle. What can you say about where it ended up, and how disappointing is this to you on a personal level? You put your neck out for him a few times, went past other candidates and tried to stay with him.
I've been in this. When you're in a position where you have to have that conversation with people, it's on a personal level. It is difficult. It's their families. It is a difficult thing, but it is part of the job. It is part of the responsibility that you take on. And I don't see Kyle at all, or Kyle coming here as a failure in any way. Kyle was instrumental in where this organization is today. I've got to think about how do we get where we want to go in the future, and what are the best ways for us to be better, and what are new ideas and new thoughts. But from that time back in 2014, Lance, to now, it's a journey. And not just Kyle, but other people who are along for parts of that journey, if we finally get, and we're determined to get to where we need to get to, those people will all have their fingerprints on that journey and all be major contributors. And that's what makes me thankful, not just for Kyle, but for a lot of the people who have helped along the way.
Mark.
Brendan, in his comments on Monday, Kyle mentioned that if he had remained, he may have to, adjust his plan. What was your takeaway from the way this season ended, and what do you see as being needed to help this group get over the hump moving forward?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of that. And again, I want to speak to new candidates. I certainly have some thoughts and opinions, but I've always the way that it's always worked here, whether you're president of the team or you're, pro scouts, like we've had a very sort of open atmosphere where people can state their opinions to the general manager, and the general manager makes decisions. That's the way it has been. It's how I expect it to be going forward. We want to support the GM. The GM and the coach and the players, they're forward-facing the most. The most pressure is on them. So I think that when it comes to that, certainly what I took from Kyle's comments were accurate and honest, which is without making any promises, we will look at everything in the organization and try to make decisions that will make us better. And that might be on a not on the timeline that everybody wants. It might not occur just this summer. It might occur during the season. It might occur on the next trade deadline. But, just being different doesn't solve something. And me removing Kyle from the position of general manager isn't the solution. It's finding something that is a better fit, that is a solution. And it's the same on the ice. And I think that's what Kyle was saying was, and I don't know how you argue with that if we find a way to make an improvement on the ice, then we have to explore that. That wasn't directed at any one player or any one position or at any job specifically. We are every single year looking to get better. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not, but that is always the goal.
Last question, guys.
You mentioned Brandon Pridham. Is he a candidate in your search here? And the other thing is, I mean, it's not just a draft. You've got contract issues coming up with Nylander, with Austin Matthews, and there's deadlines coming up. I mean, how difficult is it to spread around those things? Because those are things that can't wait, even if there is a prolongated process to look for a new GM.
Yeah, and I think to answer your first question, I'm not ruling anybody out at this point. I think we'll have all those conversations. As I said to you, I've told you what some of the things that would be attractive to me, but I'm not ruling out any possibilities in a future general manager. And then yeah, we have to get to work. And Brandon's a great example of a guy that has excellent relationships with agents and players and getting ready for the draft. So we have a staff in place. We have a staff that certainly feels wounded today, as we all do and as we all should. But we also have a staff that is professional and ready to do the job and prepared to do the job. And hopefully we find a general manager as soon as possible and somebody that fits what we're looking for and can help the Toronto Maple Leafs get to the next level. Because as we saw this year, the goal wasn't just to get past the first round and everything gets easier. You get past the first round and you lose a very closely fought series in the second round, and it's devastating, as it should be. And it's hard, and people are impacted and affected. But the reality is it doesn't get easier in the third round. It doesn't get easier by going to the finals. There's only one team that it's easy for at the end of the year, and that's the winner. So we learned this year by successfully getting out of the first round that there is no nice summer or finish line just for having partial success. And quite frankly, what we've learned here as a group, many of them for the first time, the second round doesn't make it feel better. And the news that's coming, if we are lucky enough to keep improving and keep getting better, is it only gets harder. The pressure only mounts. The ability to make decisions under pressure only gets harder as you get to the third round, as you get to the fourth round. Your decisions are more impactful and have more of an impact on the fan base as you get deeper into the playoffs.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.